Hello everybody, and thanks for joining us on our third episode of May I Ask a Question for the year. This week we're going to start off with an accessibility question because yesterday was Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and I don't know if you saw some of the tweets that Mel Summer was putting out and the blog post that she wrote on the Ember blog, but there's always a few things that you can do to kind of help raise awareness and kind of try things out. And we've got a few other good questions kind of teed up, some recent ones, and I think there's one reasonably old question as well, which we're kind of pulling out of the archives. I think that's it. Do you want to say anything before we jump in?
Oh yeah, so I had that Mel's blog post, which I'll put a link here in the chat too, for Global Accessibility Awareness Day, offers a list of things that you can do that take, anywhere from 5 minutes to 60 minutes. She's grouped them up by category, and one of them is to look for an unaccessible code sample in the Ember.js guides and submit a PR to fix it. So I know that's something that I'm looking forward to trying to get through this week, because I have a feeling that the question we're going to work on today probably shows up in the guides with this problem. And so after today's call, I'm going to go hunting to see if I can fix that issue. So and check out that blog post. She also provides some resources suggesting what it's like for someone to use a screen reader to navigate the web, and to learn how to actually use a screen reader yourself. So, I think there was a talk that she gave a little while back that she said something along the lines of, within your lifetime, almost everyone is going to have some sort of disability, whether you're young or old. Like, a ton of people in a ton of different situations use assistive technology, and that'll probably include us at some point in our lives. So, think about when you get older and your eyesight starts to be not so great. That's just the march of time, is like you don't perceive contrast as well, and you've got those reading glasses at the end of your nose and everything's too small and you can't, make out what's going on. That's real life. And so we have to serve everybody from, people in those sorts of situations to, people who need screen readers to use the web in their regular daily experience, or other technology as well. So just to throw that out there, it's a really cool article.
I've got a good example of like what you just said there, of like everybody uses assistive technologies or whatever. Yesterday I was doing a RFC roundup with Dublin Ember.js meetup, and I don't know if you've seen the RFCs, anybody watching, but they are usually quite a lot of text. So let me see, Empress RFCs. They are, like, if you go through any of these, there's like a lot of text that you have to go through all at once. And I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I'm dyslexic, so a block of text like this is quite hard to follow along with. And because I've been testing out, thanks to Mel, screen readers, having the screen reader read this while I'm reading it is really helpful.
That's awesome.
So actually I'm starting to feel some of the pains that people feel when they can't navigate around a website using a screen reader. So, like, even just trying it out, you might find that, it's not just assistive technologies for people who aren't able to, consume the content, but also it can help you in unexpected ways.
Well, I'm thinking also, whoever's a fan here of navigating through your, coding experience and everything without using a mouse, if you're used to keyboard shortcuts and you like to be able to tab through things, tabbing through things should be something you can do successfully on websites. Like, if it actually, if you've ever used a form and wanted to hit tab between the form fields, that same sort of thing can work for other parts of websites. And so there's this, there's this enormous effect where building things more accessibly helps everybody as well. So anyway, shall we jump to the question?
Okay, so let's start with the first one here.
Yeah, and I can give a little bit of background on this one. So this is an actual question that came up during my work a couple weeks ago when I was upgrading a whole bunch of add-ons, and I got myself at least part way to an answer, but I don't have the full answer yet. And one of the great things about Stack Overflow is that you can document what you know for other people as well. So if someone else gets stuck, they can get some help with this. So I tried to look for information about this on Stack Overflow to see if someone had already asked it, and they had not. And this is such an important thing and such a common mistake before there were these linting rules introduced. So Chris, I'll let you talk through how you read this and what you think the context is.
So first thing that I was going to do here, looking at it, like trying to get up my context, is like there's a very good code example here. So this is like absolutely paramount if somebody's trying to get a question answered in Stack Overflow, like show reproduction, like give an example of code. And what it's saying is, I've just upgraded and I get this warning now, interaction added to non-interactive element. So what I'm thinking is I'm just going to take that and put it in our little sandbox. I'm going to put actually create this as an action on our application and see if I get the same error when I run it or I build it or wherever that error comes out. And then the idea would be to work with that and figure out how to make it not give that error.
Speaking of accessibility, could you zoom in?
Which one?
Big in.
Zoom in
all
of
them.
The ones.
All of them. That's good. Thank you.
That's looking good. Let's zoom in this one. Okay. I can't actually see that, so I think I might move that over here a little bit. Ooh. Need to find a better way to do command lines on Twitch. Okay, so what am I doing? So I think I'm going to do Ember.js for Ember generate a controller application, so that we can actually have a date thing. So I'm going to also put in here yesterday date, and in our application I'm going to have date is yesterday, and what did we say? Actions
select date.
Date.
So
date.
I realized I left out an important thing actually in my question here, which I'm going to edit it to add it now, which is that the action in this case, its job is to take, to go to a new route.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that's not really reflected here in the semantics of the example that I gave.
Okay, so
when you click.
In that case, I will do a thing. What will I do? I will do Ember.js root. More.
So that brings in the scope a little bit. I am curious though, that, if it wasn't going to take you to a new route, if it was just something that should happen elsewhere on the page, like, toggle a setting or something like that, what it should look like instead, but we can get to that as well.
Yeah, let's do both of those questions, even though you only asked the one of them. Actually figured out something. So
what I do know already is like the most canonical type of interaction for having something accessible is that if you're going to a new place, make it a link. If you are, making something happen within the same view context, within the same page, then you would make it a button. But buttons can't have containing divs and things. And that is kind of where I got stuck. So it's not really appropriate to make this a button because it's taking us somewhere new, and it has to have this markup inside of it. So, for this one, that's pretty well scoped. But there's other places in the app where it's not taking you to a new route. It's like just having some sort of setting or effect or whatever. Fancy forms and things like that. So anyway, that's all I'll say about that for now.
I think it's interesting that you kind of bring up this. If it's bringing you somewhere, it's a link. If it's not bringing you somewhere, it should be a button. And I think we can probably investigate both of those here.
Okay.
So what I've been doing in the background while you were saying that is I created a content route. It has a dynamic segment. I always forget what they're called.
Mm-hmm.
It has a dynamic segment, and I'm going to take our action thing. In fact, we don't need this controller anymore. Oh, actually, do you know what I'll do? I'm going to rename it to be content, because it's a content controller now. And I'm going to put my action back in, and I'm going to say that you said when you click it, it brings you to that new route. So this dot transition to route content with the dynamic segment date. So that means, let's see if that works. npm start. Probably broke all the things, but we'll see.
Going the extra mile there with the dynamic segments.
Well, because if we wanted it to...
It's real life. It's real life. It's probably what I would be doing. So.
Yeah, true. So everything's running just a little bit slow. Oh, here we go.
Haha, there it is. Interaction added to non-interactive elements.
So that's using... What is this? This is template linter. Template lint error.
So it might be interesting to have a look. The normal debugging flow for this is like I would look up I would try to go find the actual linting rule where it's coming from, because for a ton of things in Ember that throw warnings and errors and deprecations, if you Google them, you'll get to the place in the linting where it describes what's going on, why it's going on, and in some cases how to fix it. So I'll put the link here, and I read it.
So just like you said, if you just Google the title of it, the no interact, it's come straight to where we need to go, I assume. Yeah, this looks like it. It's interesting because what you said earlier on, this answer, this rule allows the following. This is kind of like what you were saying earlier on, where if you're doing this, it kind of needs to be a button. But the way that we've set it up, we don't want it to be a button because it's going to a different location. Okay, cool. Something I noticed.
Side note, sorry, the video, I don't think you can do anything about this. It feels like it's extra glitchy today.
Your video?
I'm wondering, I might just turn off my video because I can't hardly stand to look at it myself. Is there anything we could do to fix it?
I'm not entirely sure what causes it, you see, so...
It's worse than usual, I think.
Yeah, it could be.
Alright, I'm going to do that. If I do that, does that mess
Well, actually,
anything up
no,
on your
let
end?
me do it from my side. So,
Okay.
It's sad, I feel like I'm on my own now.
That's okay. I should just send you an icon image or something.
That's actually really easy to throw in if you want to.
I'll do
Um,
that. I'll do that later. Anyway.
Yeah, I had this plan where I wanted to create like an overlay, because there you can make overlays quite easily in in like web technologies, and I
Yeah.
wanted it to be like somebody's image, but then that kind of audio sample like visualization. Like anytime you say something, it's showing that it's coming from you, if that makes sense.
Oh, that'd be interesting. Very
Yeah,
cool.
that's an interesting project. We could stream building it together. Okay, so the interesting side note that I was going to say is that here's our example and it's working, but it's odd because actually, as a like, not even just considering the accessibility aspect of this isn't a very good user experience for me, because I don't know that I can click on that div. Like, it's not visually represented. It's not like if I hover over it, it thinks I'm going to select it, and then I click on it, and it's gone somewhere else. So it's like
Yeah.
a lot of these times,
Well,
if you're making things better for accessibility, it can make it better for everyone. Okay, so what was your solution first of all?
so, one of the things, well, so I think what how do I say this? One of the things I looked at to try and figure out what was valid was I used the is it WC3, W3C, one of those words, validator. Just like the first thing I tried was to make it a button, I guess is what I'm saying. There it is. Yeah. The first thing I tried to do was make a button. So I kind of want to walk through like how I arrived at button being a bad idea.
Okay.
So if you just
So
copy,
throw the whole thing in
copy
there.
that, take the emberisms out.
Just get rid of the on. Will we?
Yeah, take that whole thing.
What if I put in an on-click as a function?
Oh, I have
Because-
no idea, but you could try. Could be. I didn't even try that.
Because it might have a different result if you do or don't have an on-click.
All right, so this is the status quo. You can scroll past all of these because it's complaining that it doesn't have a body and all that stuff. So
Okay.
that seems okay. So now if you switch this to button instead of div as your wrapping element, and check that. And if you scroll down, this is where I found out that I cannot put divs inside of buttons. So I wanted to
this
walk
is
through
interesting.
that.
Contexts in which a div may be used. Oh, interesting. So a phrasing content. Do we know what a phrasing content is?
I have no clue. Nope.
What does it even mean? Phrasing content. Oh, this is so complicated. So you can have buttons as buttons. Inside buttons. So there's no div in there. Is there a span?
Yeah. That's interesting.
Oh, I do see span.
Wait, so do you read that a phrasing content is allowed? Phrasing content is the text of a document. So I can tell you a little bit about the context here. Like what are sometimes what you're actually trying to accomplish has an enormous bearing on which HTML elements and things you should use for accessibility.
Yeah.
And in this example, so I work at CardStack, and one of the design patterns that we have is when you're looking at a dashboard type layout, there'll be sort of like a set of cards, like think of them almost like playing cards laid out in front of you, and on each of those cards it will have a kind of a miniature representation of what you would see if you followed it. So maybe it's a dashboard that shows you statistics about, some funds that have been added to an account. Each of those little cards would have a little graph for each type of funds, and it would be it would be the miniature version of the actual graph that you would see if you click through. It brings you to the next page and you get to see, okay, here's that same graph I was looking at with more detail and context around it. So it is a link in the sense that it takes you somewhere else. And secondly, it has got to have some sort of containing elements inside of it. Like that's sort of central to the design flow, that it's not just a button that's like, click here to see, this in US dollars. Like that's not what we're going for here. It is very, it's very dynamic. So anyway, how do you read this?
Well, my question was like, if it is dynamic like that, I assume you as CardStack or whatever don't have a full control over what could be inside it. So like you can't say you can't use divs.
Well, we don't have full control in the sense that, if somebody tried to do that, like, the most app authoring tools will let you do the bad thing with regards to accessibility if you try hard enough, and some don't have any guardrails whatsoever. And so, like, theoretically, yeah, someone could do whatever they want, but on the flip side, we're at this point where we get to define the API and we get to define the guidelines that people are following, and I think this is something where at this stage, this isn't breaking anything for anybody else if we start introducing these constraints just because of where we are in the life cycle of the project. So like I could do something, like if I really thought through this problem and I knew what needed to be done, when people author cards, we ask them to give an example of this tiny little widget size thing and their full page layout. And for the tiny widget size thing, there's nothing that stops us from saying like, hey, like this is going to be represented as it's going to be wrapped in a link, and so that people do their styling appropriately. It's going to be wrapped in a link if that's the direction we go. And these are the types of elements that are valid to use inside of a link. If you have, any doubts, like follow this thing to figure out what you can use. It's important to make your app accessible. Like that's something that I would love to represent in the guides that I'm writing right now. So
right.
we have the power. We have the technology.
Okay, so in the case where this is a button, I think if I understand what I just said, is that this will work if we change it to a span. Let's try that.
So that's allowed? Oh, so just not divs, huh? Can we look at that message again? Also, can you zoom in again? It's itty bitty.
Oh yeah, sorry, different
Thank
page.
You.
So this is, what was it before? It was a div, you said?
Div, yeah. I want to fully understand, because just because we switched it to span, doesn't mean that's necessarily the appropriate. So content model for the element button, you can use phrasing content, but there must be no interactive content descendant. So does this mean that you shouldn't put a button inside a button? Because a button is an interactive
Yes.
thing.
There you go.
Okay.
An interactive content is a button. But it's like a whole bunch of stuff. Image is if the use map. Oh yeah. Oh, use map. So
they're not interactive inside. That's good. That describes the thing. Can we look at the phrasing content again when you get the...
So this is the phrasing content. I'll zoom in for our...
So phrasing content.
Viewers.
Phrasing content is... Whoa, where did it go? Phrasing content is the text of the document as well as the elements that mark up the text at an intra-paragraph level. So you can use, so it was telling us we can use phrasing content elements that are not interactive. So that would be things like, oh, Canvas, perfect. Okay. Can use things like spans, SVGs, yay. Unordered list. No, that's you, not unordered list. Interesting. Very, very cool. All right, so since my...
So that means, so we still have the original thing that you said. If you're navigating somewhere else, you should use
Yep. A link.
a link, and if you're using it as like a button, as an interactive, you should use button, like if it's
Great.
doing
Okay.
a thing.
So we know what to do now if clicking that thing should do something like expand a collapsible container or something, or toggle some setting. We know how to fix that, but we still need to address that this is essentially a link.
So let's do this. So we have one of them that's going to do select date, and then we said echo something. So I'm going to create an echo action that that's just setting the message, and then that means that in here we can have message. Okay, so again, running this will get 2 errors because there's 2 of them.
Yep.
And then we had our application, wherever it's gone. So the first one, when you click it, it changes, it navigates to a second place, and the second one, oh, that's interesting.
Yep.
The second one, you should click it, and it says something in the.
Okay.
So the first one we said, it's interesting because, the quick fix here is to make it an A.
Yep.
But I'm wondering if that makes sense.
Well, yeah. So, like, what does it actually look like? Because
really, if you think about what it's doing here, selecting date is navigating to a different place. So all we're doing in our controller is this.transition to root. We're not doing anything else. So with that in mind, I would move to actually change this to a link to content today. Class equals some class, and then in that link to, you have your div.
Well, but not a div. A span, right?
Oh, so this one's the A. The span
Yes.
thing was in the button.
Oh, right,
So-
right. Yes, I got confused. You're right. The link element, I think, is allowed to have other stuff inside of it.
So that now works exactly the same, because it's using link to, which means that this action isn't being used anymore. It just doesn't exist. So you get a whole bunch of benefits here. A, it looks like a link now. Very nice. B, it's using kind of internals, and it'll work correctly. You know, and you don't have to have extra code in your thing, which is nice.
Yep. So in the real world example, I think it's like looking up all sorts of things and doing all sorts of processing. But I'm optimistic that I could turn all of that processing that made someone make it an action instead of a link. I could turn all that processing into like a computed property or something.
Yeah.
To represent the path within the Ember app. Like, we're staying within the Ember app in this example, so cool.
Oh, I have another problem. Because I think of this as always like JavaScript-y things, I always put them as
I know. Well, and it used to allow you to do either, like, there wasn't a linting thing for it. So
incorrect indentation for div. It's this one.
I
Go on,
think it's
get out of
that.
there.
Yeah.
So we've still got one left to do because we haven't fixed the second one that's actually doing the echo. So this one we said we wanted to do button. I wonder if we get an error.
I don't think so.
Oh, interesting.
And so this is like where you get into that territory where you really, really need some sort of. I wonder if this would show up as a problem in like a Chrome audit, because the whole like putting a div inside of a button, it'll render. Like you can see that it did here, but you can't rely on that cross browser. You can't rely on it for older browsers because it's not in the spec. So,
I just added best practices in accessibility.
You could get into a nasty spot where nobody can use your button. Does it throw any warnings here?
No.
Interesting.
It's probably something somewhere that's throwing a warning.
Take your life into your own hands here with whether.
I heard something interesting, where I don't know if it's happening here, and I can't remember the context that I was actually given, but I was talking to somebody about like fastboot stuff, where like fastboot does a thing on the server side, gives the browser HTML, and then the browser goes, oh, you gave me something invalid, and it entirely changes it. So it's like, oh, I'm going to rewrite what you gave me because you did it wrong. Because, So the browser is always trying to fix bad HTML. So even though it says div here, that could actually be changed in a fastboot world.
That's true.
It might actually change it.
Yeah, I worked in a vanilla JavaScript and HTML static site once, and we had left out a closing div at some point, and it was I forget why we just didn't have any HTML linting on this thing, which was a bad move. We put HTML linting in, but eventually, but we didn't have a closing div, and it like broke the footer of this website. It looked fine, but you couldn't actually click on just one of the links, and it was like, what's going on here? And what had happened was that the browser had resolved the mistake enough that the web page layout wasn't broken, but some of the like interactivity of it was. And I also wondered, like I was using the latest Chrome at the time, like if someone was on like an older version of Edge or Internet Explorer or an older version of Chrome, whatever, maybe it was completely broken for them. I don't know. And so that's the question here, is like, just because Chrome isn't throwing us an error doesn't mean it's still valid markup. And that's kind of why I wanted to show the that checker, the validator that we looked at. So,
and this is our what we ended up with.
Yay! Very cool.
So we have our link that brings us to today, and we have the button that gives us a echo, which is nice, and it passes our tester, our linter.
Yay!
Cool. So, do you want to say anything else about this before we move on to the next question?
I guess I'll just say that if you want to try and improve the accessibility of your own applications, if they're not Ember apps, I find that the Chrome accessibility audit thing is really handy. And if it is an Ember app, there's a suite called Ember Ally Testing, that's spelled A11Y, Ally, that lets you run accessibility audits through your test suite, as well as will give you a tool that'll show you highlighted the things that are, causing problems for accessibility in your app. And those tools are super powerful. You get a lot of the same outputs and warnings and things that you could get from running the Lighthouse audit, but you get it right inside your test suite. And that is very important to put it in the test suite, because what happens is if you're just like, oh, I'll just run this accessibility audit every once in a while, then you're faced with the situation where you have to go back and fix things after the fact. They've maybe been broken for other people in the meantime, and then you've got to be the person who goes and bugs your collaborators like, hey, we need to fix this, and you've got to square away time for it, and it becomes something you didn't plan for. And you end up being that person who's like, hey, remember, we need to put, alt text on images. You have to say that all the time. And anytime you can offload that sort of like, I need to remind people to do X onto a linter, like, you definitely do. Yeah. It's a better experience for everyone. And so those tools are really easy to get started with. I wrote a tutorial on it once. And so I just encourage everybody to give that a try. You don't have to read a ton of articles to figure out what to do. It guides you through the process. It's like a wizard.
Yeah.
So.
And it's another thing, just to add to your idea of like adding it into the CI. Like, yep. It's also a good educational tool as well. Like, if you've got a new junior on your team, or even if you've got a senior that's never done anything accessibility-wise, yep. they add a very small feature and they're like, oh, that'll pass CI and we'll just merge it. Then it fails CI, and the error is as clear as what we saw in the template linter. They'll go, oh, I didn't even know that I couldn't do that. I didn't know yep. that I needed to be thinking about this. And it's always a useful way for people to kind of experience that organically, yeah. And as you say, without being kind of, told by a particular person, because that's always an awkward conversation. It's like, especially if your boss is not following the rules for accessibility, you have to go up and say, you're doing it wrong, please don't fire me,
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, how this idea that if you're working in Ember, it just helps you be a better developer wherever you go, whatever you're working on. And I think this is one of those cases. Is like, mm-hmm. I've learned this, and if I go work in something else, I'm gonna remember, like, right, I need to stop and think about what sorts of things can go in a button and whether this should be a button or a link. And that crosses between all stacks and frameworks and implementations, this like awareness and knowledge. So anyway, that's it. That's what I have to say.
Cool. Awesome. So we can move on now. So we'll close our sandbox. We can get rid of this because we learned all about it. And then our HTML standard. God, I don't remember the last time I needed to check the spec on anything. Okay, so I'll answer that one in Stack Overflow later on today. Moving on. So, this one is again a very good question. I don't know if I showed you this one before, but essentially they're trying to use Ember Bootstrap to render a mm-hmm. form using Bootstrap form, and they show the error. They've got a screenshot of the error, which is just as good as, in this case, as like copying and pasting the error. They told us the process that they used to install it, and they've given us an example of a form that they're trying to create. So really, we should just be able to follow these and copy and paste this and see if it gives us the same error. So let's do that. Let me add all of these to our accessibility. I'm going to create a branch. New branch. Accessibility question, just in case I need it later. And then we can come back to our master with Zang. Okay, so we're back to scratch. So let's do some of the commands that they said. Ember install Ember Bootstrap. Phew. Oh, I can make this bigger again. Yeah, that. Okay, so what else does it want us to do? So it wants us to do Ember generate, Ember Bootstrap, preprocessor, Bootstrap version 3. I wonder why they're separate commands. Ah, there we go, look. So it's, after we run Ember install Ember Bootstrap, it is running the default blueprint for Ember Bootstrap, which is installing a bunch of extra things, Bootstrap 4.3.1, but these two commands, I really think we could run them as two separate, as one command, but we'll try them as separate ones and see what happens. Also, what do we have here? So it's added some stuff to Ember CLI build, and it's added Bootstrap and Ember Bootstrap. Okay. Preprocessor SAS. Preprocessor SAS. So it's automatically installing Ember CLI SAS for us, which is interesting. There we go, automatically installing Ember CLI SAS. Oh, and stuff that, it's interesting because the way that the add-on structure works, if you're installing an add-on and it installs other add-ons for you and they need other add-ons installed, it can kind of get into this chain of, going all the way down, which I think is interesting. I have definitely used that a little bit too much on my Empress work, so it's a lot of fun to do when it all comes together. Okay, cool. So it's added SAS, Ember CLI SAS. It's still got the other Bootstrap stuff, which is good. It's added a SCSS. Okay, cool. And then this. Yeah. So I have a sneaking suspicion we could probably do maybe all three of these commands in one. I'm pretty sure you could potentially do Ember install, Ember Bootstrap, and just pass both of these at the same time. But it looks like it's doing all right if we're following their exact commands.
Bootstrap. Should we also take a look at the package, default package.json in the, or no, that was a different question. Never mind, continue.
That was a different question, yeah.
All right, so it's got the Bootstrap form.
Okay, let me just double check here. So it's installed, added import statement, added Bootstrap configuration. So what do we got? We're left with Bootstrap 3, fine. We've got SAS, we've got Ember CLI SAS, that looks all correct. We've got our import statement in app SAS, and we've got Bootstrap version 3. This looks reasonable. And then what did they say? Then I created a new root, and in the template I put in the following. So what is it? It's a login form. So let's generate a login form. G root login. It's probably a sign up form. properly look at it, but we'll see. So they're taking the form and putting it above the outlet. Let's do that. This is the exact code that they're using. I'm going to just fix the indentation. In fact, I might do that on the question as well, just to make things awesome. And close our other things that we aren't using anymore. Yeah. Okay. And let's run it. Let's see if we get the same error. Okay, so we had a login. We'll get rid of the welcome page from the application JS because it will have both of them. There, my application. Yeah. Okay. Do we have an error? An action named submit was not found, so we need to have a login controller. And then in that login controller, we want actions submit. Was it doing anything? Login? Submit, action, submit, I don't know. An action named submit was not found in sandbox controller login. Oh, whoopsie, I opened the wrong file. Controller login. Assertion failed. Must provide a valid form layout attribute. Interesting. So I assume this is something to do with Ember Bootstrap. Is there documentation?
What was the error you were getting there again?
So this is an error here.
Form layout. Okay.
I could probably make that bigger actually. Oh, I can make everything bigger. Haha, amazing.
Very nice. Thank you. Field must provide a valid form layout attribute. And what's the form? Did they pass a form layout?
So I'm assuming, let me have a look here. Form layout equals form layout.
Oh yeah, okay. So we need to.
So we'll just figure out what it's supposed to be. Components. Is it? What are we on? Yes, form. Maybe Bootstrap docs. What? Is it a CS form layout?
Here, let me look.
Inline form. Inline. Let's try inline.
Ah, okay.
Probably documentation somewhere that I'm not really. Oh, here we go. It's working.
Yay. Okay. So they must have.
Let's have a look at the question again.
Something.
Uncaught. Cannot read property. Manager of null. Object evaluate. Next. So it's definitely in the vendor somewhere. I have just installed Ember Bootstrap. We've already so I have as I said, I have a
You
sneaking
know,
suspicion that this is easier. We don't need to do all these steps, but we followed exactly those steps, and we did
I
this.
also this feels a little bit of one of those problems potentially where if you've done a whole bunch of things that add files and move them around, sometimes just restarting the local server.
Mm.
I'm not sure. Like it's not usually, it doesn't usually look quite like that. It's usually more like cannot find file, blah blah blah. But that was visited. Yeah, there's got to be cannot read property manager of null. Yeah,
I have a sneaking suspicion.
yeah.
I wonder if this is an earlier Ember version.
Oh, possibly.
I had another sandbox here ready on a like 215 Ember 215. We could try and do the exact same steps on this Ember and see.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Before I do that, I just want to quick Ember pass Ember install parameters guides to Ember.js.com. I want to see if I can get it to install in one line. So we have Ember install Ember Bootstrap, which I have a sandbox 215. It was for a different question, but it should work perfectly well. Wrong button. This one. Yeah. Ember. Oh no, I copied it already. Copy that, and I want to see if I can just pass these in. See if they actually do anything. Interesting. Let's see, Ember help. Let's see if it says, or no, Ember install help I want to do. Oh look, it worked.
All right.
So you can just pass it. It's weird because I got this error that I wasn't sure about, where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, Ember CLI doesn't know anything about these
Yeah.
commands. But it's not Ember CLI that I care about here. Oop, no, don't do that. It's Bootstrap that cares about these two things. So you can do it all one line. Today I learned. Did I close the previous one? I did. Okay. Let's try. I don't even know what a Ember 215 app starts with like. Oh, I've already got a local host, so let's use that one. Oh. Interesting.
That's nice.
I don't even know what the plugin is. It's okay. Seems to have started all right.
All right.
Oh, look. So we did have welcome page back in 215 days. Let's just double check that this is actually an Ember 215. Info. Oh, look. What's new? That's new. Ember 2.15. Okay, so we've installed Bootstrap. Oh, I keep doing that. We've installed Bootstrap, but now we want to do an Ember generate. Ember generate root login. Because we need an action as well. I'm going to just copy pasta literally everything that we did from last time. I wonder where things will break. If things will break. And then we want the controller login. Oh wow, import Ember from Ember. So this is before the import stuff.
Yep.
Oh, we've got Nick joining us in the chat as well. Hey Nick. I know it's Nick because, excuse me, I've given some people VIP status on Twitch, which is new.
VIP.
Don't worry, you're a VIP as well, Jen.
Yay. If I was streaming, I'd make you a VIP as well. VIP is for everyone. Wait, I can probably do that. I don't know if it cares that I haven't done any live streams in a while. Anyway.
I only figured out I could do it because it told me when I reached 50 followers, I was able to add VIPs.
Oh, fancy. All right, well.
Fancy. Well, look at that. It works.
Yay. Okay.
So it seems like it's not anything specifically to do with Ember Bootstrap. One thing that I will say, is that I am absolutely flabbergasted that this is just like working without issue. Like this is such a testament to the way that Ember kind of deals with backwards compatibility, that the exact same commands to install this and get it running and everything, it just works. Like with a few differences.
2.15 was what, like 2 years ago? More?
Yeah.
Because Ember 3 was January of last year.
I was, that's the wrong one.
And so if we backpedal 48 weeks, 2 years ago? 2.5 years ago?
2.15 was September 2017.
Yep. All right, so a little less than 2 years ago. Well, that's cool.
The only difference that I noticed is that we've got no angle brackets here, and then in the controllers we've got no packages. It's not like import controller from @Ember controller or whatever. Which I think is funny. This is where it was for a very long time. But yeah, it works.
Yay!
You know, it's fortunate we've done, part of this work here, and I guess it's a good kind of lesson for anybody who's interested in maybe trying to get into Stack Overflow answering, or even just answering any questions on the Discord or anywhere online. Like, the very first thing that you need to do is check if it's actually a problem.
Yep. Well, this is partly how I learned Ember, actually. Was like, I was working on Ember all by myself, and I would look at the questions that people posted in the chat, and if I thought it was something that I would want to be able to know or solve or whatever, I would actually try to hunt down the answer, and I'd like play around with it a little bit. And that really expanded my own knowledge. Like, I was able to learn things before I had hit them as problems, because I had a decent instinct for, like, whether I should, whether it might be something I want might want to learn. So like if this question had popped up, I would have been very likely to give it a try because I was trying to use Ember Bootstrap, and like being able to debug Ember Bootstrap was really helpful. And then I could see, I didn't usually come up with the answer, but then I could see when other people responded what the answer was as well. It's like I kind of got to come along for that learning pathway.
That's interesting as well, because it's often weird kind of answering a question, especially if you're learning and not knowing if what you said is right. You know, having other people come along and like give other answers. It's a good way of testing your ideas of how you would have solved it, or how you would have approached it, whatever.
And even if I wasn't sure, like at first I was hesitant to share anything unless I was certain that I had reached the like final answer. But as time went on, like I started trying to be like, oh, did you try this? Did you try that? Did you check your controller? I started asking those things because even though I was a beginner at the time, by the time someone's posted something on Stack Overflow or they've come to the chat, they're like stuck. And just having someone ask you those questions is sometimes enough to get you unstuck. It's enough to have that light bulb moment. And maybe it's not the controller, but maybe they're like, you know what? I should go through and look at my top level files and see if I've got something weird going on here. Like you can get someone kicked off on the right path. So
yeah.
It's the things should lean towards like try to share, try to say something. And the Ember Stack Overflow is like pretty chill, especially compared to the rest of Stack Overflow, in the sense that like if you want to just chime in with like a hey, did you look at this? Like that's going to be something that could potentially help somebody out.
It's funny because I've noticed what you're saying about chill. Like, there's so many questions in the Ember Stack Overflow that would have gotten closed instantaneously if they were elsewhere on Stack Overflow. It's like not a valid question. Like, why are you even asking this? But like, they don't get closed as quickly, and I think that's a good thing personally, because
I think so
as you say, people are stuck. They want help, even if it's just, as you say, have you tried this thing?
Yep. So what is our advice to this person again? Are we going to suggest for them, just let them know that we've done a full, we've tried to reproduce this in a sample app, and that we didn't get this error, and like, what do we want to say here? Tell them to look through their app for manager.
My thoughts here are that we should write up a full thing saying we tested this and it's not a problem in both Ember, latest, actually I don't think this is latest, it's 3.9 or whatever, and 2.15. So if you happen to be running a different version, like maybe an earlier version or something, please let us know and I'll edit the answer and kind of approach it again. It doesn't seem to be something specific to Bootstrap, so I would say something like, check to see if you made any other changes at the same time, because if it was working beforehand and you installed Ember Bootstrap,
oh yes,
like maybe they did something else just before or afterwards, and then it suddenly stopped working. So,
and I would tell them to comment this out, this whole block of this form, comment it out and see what happens. That's actually the naive, like I have no idea what's going wrong approach. Like a lot of times I'll just start commenting out things. And that could
it's quite a good approach here, I think, because it's like sometimes you get this stuff here and it's like, oh, we found an error, useful, thanks, in object.evaluate vendor strange name line 25,570. It's like entirely useless. You could go in and debug that, but it's like you don't want to. So doing this kind of hunting by deleting stuff or commenting stuff out is always kind of useful as maybe a last chance effort or something like that.
Yep.
If you're
You know,
not doing,
this is also one of those times where when someone shows me an error like this, I also immediately begin asking them about the observers and computed properties with side effects in their app. Like this whole, tried to read property blah of null is sometimes what happens if you have unexpected interactions.
yeah.
And that's why observers are somewhat discouraged in Ember because not because they don't work, they work fine, but it's easy to use them in such a way that you have like unintended chains of like a chain, like dominoes knocking over because you change one thing and all of a sudden all these other things throughout your app change. Like you have that power. You can do that. It's just not a great idea. And so it could be something like that. Maybe they're working in a much larger app and, maybe there's something on this template that we're not seeing where, when it's on did insert element, it's like setting some property that's like tripping something else up. So there's a lot of different things that could be going on here.
I think you might actually be on the tail of what is causing a problem. If it is just by adding this, it's like breaking, because I didn't notice this the first time I looked at it, but the model is set to this. So we have things that are like property as text area. So it'll be interacting with this dot text area.
Like that's
this dot
interesting.
checkbox or whatever. So it's like
I've never used model as this. What even is?
It would be on the controller in that case.
But like,
so
what is this?
So when you're in the template, let's go to the template. When you're in the login template, the context that you're in, what this is referring to, is the same context as your controller. So it's like face equal faces whatever test. So
that is very interesting.
So this dot face, is that what I called it?
Huh. So you passed the whole context, and that seems not great.
I think it might be actually a different version. You can do this dot face. It would be
okay.
Or is it face test? Yeah. Should be there. Oh, I didn't save it.
That would do it.
Yeah, so test is there, so you can do this dot face.
And so you could just pass the entire controller context. Yeah, that seems like that could really be. Because if you're setting.
If you're using, like here, they've got text area. So that means that the text area. If you have computed properties that are using those things, like even just setting them as like the two-way binding on an input or whatever, could be hitting off observers or computer properties or whatever. So there's I really think you've cracked it there. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where unless you can give us an example of the full set of code that's breaking, we can't really fix it. So the next bit of advice I would give would be to, like, if you can get a minimal reproduction, then we can help. Otherwise, maybe just say a few of the things to look out for and see if it helps them.
Right, like telling them that if they do, when they pass the whole this context, that they're mutating things on it.
Yeah.
That is actually quite useful. That's bitten me. When I first learned to code, I assumed that when I was in regular JavaScript land, that if I was working with an object and I set that object equal to something else, that I got a copy of it. Like that, it just didn't occur to me to do that it would be anything else, because that's, the behavior that I saw with strings. And it was like a while before I learned that was actually interacting in a bad way, that I was changing. If I saved that object to a new variable and I changed something about that new variable, and I was changing it everywhere else too, that was
Yeah.
bad time. So that's the same sort. That's like an easy mistake to make, and you could think in Ember that, if you look at that code, you think like, oh, it's just setting these properties. It's just static stuff. It's not gonna be affecting, what I'm passing into it, but it is. That's cool. All right. Well.
So I put together an answer to this, but again, it's slightly unfortunate that it's not giving them the solution.
Yeah.
There is a little piece of advice that I can say. You can break these down into one command, but other than that, there's nothing I can really.
Yeah. Okay. I wrote an answer to the accessibility thing in the meantime, and I posted that. So if you want to take a look after this call, if it looks good to you, or if there's any
Cool.
edits that you would add, let me know.
Cool. And before we wrap up, we have some people chatting. Pat Kimber,
yeah.
thanks for the kind words. And we also have Jessica JavaScript asking, what is our favorite way to create a minimal reproduction of the bug? Is it like using Ember Twiddle, or would you create a GitHub repo? What would you think?
So for myself, when it's Stack Overflow, I like to make the app myself locally and then paste all of the relevant code into the answer. Because one of the Stack Overflow rules that I think makes a lot of sense is that you can't just link to an external resource and be like, I fixed it over here. Because those things are ephemeral. Like if I go through and I decide one day to clean out my GitHub gists, I'm going to kill a bunch of my Ember Twiddle examples. And so I'm also faster at coding when it's locally, so I tend to make those like that. If I'm in the chat of Ember Discord, for example, I will tend to make twiddles instead, though, because that way we're in real time and we can have a real-time discussion about real-time interactions. So, and it's not something that I need to be concerned about. It's like, its searchability there is you could search for things, but it's like somewhat limited. It like a chat is like by definition a snapshot in time.
Well, it's
so I'll make
ephemeral as
twiddle.
well.
Yeah.
Although we now have our history, it's still like you can think of it as ephemeral.
Yeah, it gets buried, and so that's why I like to use Ember Twiddle for chat and local apps for Stack Overflow things. The other thing is too is like there are. Oh, go ahead.
Pro tip that I would say is that actually, if you're generating a new app locally, it'll initialize Git for you, and then if you're using an editor like Atom that shows you all of the changes that you've made, you just need to go through each of the changes and say, oh, actually, do you know what? I need to, copy the bits that are different here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In this case, there's a lot of extra stuff that isn't necessary, like the package JSON or the package lock, but like things like the change that you made to the router, like that's useful as a snippet in the question.
So many of these Stack Overflow questions have to do with like adding dependencies and building things and generating files. Like this one would have taken us quite a long time to figure out how to do on Ember Twiddle. There are some things about that environment that would be a little bit different. So like Ember Twiddle is perfect for like, here's, 3 different valid ways to, do a click action. That's like a great twiddle. But like I installed this thing, and this thing, and I'm getting this build problem or this rendering problem. I'm definitely going to just try to make it as simple as possible and make my own app. So, and I keep a dummy app around that's like at various versions. Like I call them, 3.0, 3.9, 2.15 is like the name of these apps, so that every time we do debugging like this, I just pull one of those up. And I saw you do the same thing. So
yeah, well, I have a temp folder, like just my home/temp. That's like if anything's in there and I want to keep it, you've put it in the wrong place. Like every I just like RMRF star in that folder, and it's like so satisfying just to clear out the cobwebs.
I've been working with Ed Faulkner on Embroider the past couple days. Embroider is a like experimental build tool for Ember, and he put on some temporary files. It says if you feel that you need to delete this, file an issue, which I think is pretty funny. Because they're operating in a temp directory, and it's stuff that should clean itself out from time to time. And if you're looking at it, it's a sign that there may be an unhandled edge case. So that was funny.
Messages to future selves.
Speaking of Embroider, I've got to run soon because I've got a card stack stand up in a little bit. So
cool. Well, we've covered 2 questions in full, and we've been here for more than an hour, so I think it's been a good session. And,
cool. And thank you for helping me figure out the accessibility thing with the link to.
It was fun. It was fun kind of like diving in deeper, because I learned a lot from that question as well. And thanks to everybody who's joined us. Thanks for everybody who's joined in the chat, and anybody who was just kind of hanging out. And we will see you next week. And follow myself on Twitter, real_ATE, or what's your Twitter, Jen?
JWWW
Weber. I will be sure to add a link to that somewhere, so that people can follow you and get notified of the next stream. But I think we've got 2 more in May, so do follow us on Twitch and get all of the notifications. And that's it. Thanks for joining.
Bye.